The blood staining the snow was hers, though Juliana Harper had stopped feeling the cuts on her feet miles back when the cold had turned everything numb. She stumbled forward through the blizzard, each step a prayer that her legs would hold just a little longer. The wedding dress she wore, once white as the snow now falling, hung torn and dirty around her ankles. She had fled her uncle's ranch 3 hours before dawn, running from the marriage he had arranged to a cattle baron twice her age, a man whose first 2 wives had died under suspicious circumstances. At 22 years old, Juliana had finally found the courage to choose potential death in the wilderness over certain misery in that union. The Wyoming territory stretched endlessly before her, nothing but white drifts and skeletal trees bending under the weight of December ice. She had lost her shoes crossing a half-frozen creek, the current tearing them from her feet as she waded through water so cold it felt like knives. That had been over an hour ago. Now she could barely see 10 feet ahead through the driving snow, and she knew with terrible clarity that she was going to die out here. Her body pitched forward, knees buckling, and she caught herself against a pine tree. The bark scraped her palms, but she felt nothing. Everything was white noise and numbness now. She tried to push herself upright again, but her legs simply would not respond. "Help," she whispered, but the wind stole the word before it could travel more than a few inches. "Someone please help me." The sound of hoofbeats reached her through the howling wind, so faint at first she thought she had imagined it. But then it grew louder, more distinct, the heavy rhythm of a horse moving carefully through deep snow. Juliana lifted her head, squinting through the white curtain of falling snow. A dark shape materialized, horse and rider moving as one through the blizzard. The man sat tall in the saddle, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind, a heavy coat dusted white with snow. He was leading a pack horse behind him, and for a moment Juliana's heart seized with fear. What if her uncle had sent men after her? What if this stranger would drag her back? But then the rider saw her, and she watched him straighten in the saddle, his head turning to take in the sight of a woman in a torn wedding dress collapsed against a tree in the middle of a snowstorm. He reined his horse to a stop and swung down from the saddle in one smooth motion. "Jesus Christ," he said, and his voice was rough with shock. He closed the distance between them in 3 long strides, dropping to his knees in the snow beside her. "Madam, what in God's name are you doing out here?" Juliana tried to speak, but her teeth were chattering so hard she could barely form words. "Running," she managed. "Had to run." The cowboy's eyes, she noticed, were a startling blue, bright against his tanned face. He looked to be in his late 20s, with dark hair curling out from under his hat and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. Those blue eyes took in everything with quick efficiency. The torn dress, her bleeding hands, her bare feet dark against the white snow. "Your feet," he said, and there was something like horror in his voice. He was already reaching down, pulling off his leather boots. "Christ, you are going to lose your toes if we do not get you warm right now." "No," Juliana protested weakly. "You need them. You cannot walk without boots." "I've got wool socks and I will be on my horse," he said firmly. He worked quickly, his hands gentle despite their size as he lifted her feet one at a time and slid his boots onto them. They were far too large, warm from his body heat, and the feeling of that warmth made Juliana gasp. "These will keep the worst of the cold out until I can get you somewhere safe." "Where?" she asked. "Where is there to go?" "My place is about 2 miles north," he said. He shrugged out of his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders before she could protest again. "I was heading home from Ardmore when the storm hit. I've got a cabin, a fire, food. You need all 3 right now." He stood and scooped her up into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. Juliana made a sound of surprise, but he was already moving toward his horse, his sock-covered feet crunching through the snow. "I can walk," she said, though they both knew it was a lie. "No, madam, you cannot," he replied. There was no judgment in his voice, just statement of fact. He settled her in the saddle first, then mounted behind her, his arms coming around to take the reins. The pack horse's lead was already tied to his saddle. "Hold on to the saddle horn. I have got you." Juliana's frozen fingers fumbled for the horn, and she felt him shift behind her, his body blocking the worst of the wind. He made a clicking sound with his tongue, and the horse started forward at a careful walk, picking its way through the drifts. "I am Owen Owens," he said after a moment, his voice close to her ear. "And you are safe now, I promise you that." "Juliana," she whispered. "Juliana Harper." "Well, Miss Harper, you are either the bravest or the most foolish woman I have ever met, running through a blizzard in a wedding dress." He paused, though I am guessing there is quite a story behind that choice. Juliana felt tears prick at her eyes, though they froze almost immediately on her lashes. "I could not marry him," she said. "I could not." Owen's arms tightened fractionally around her. "Then I reckon you made the right choice, even if it was a damn dangerous one." They rode in silence after that, Owen guiding his horse with the kind of easy skill that spoke of years in the saddle. The snow continued to fall, heavy and thick, until Juliana could barely see past the horse's ears. She had no idea how Owen knew where he was going, but he never hesitated, never seemed uncertain of the path. The cold was creeping back in despite his coat and boots. Juliana's entire body had started to shake, tremors running through her in waves. She felt Owen shift again, pulling her more firmly against his chest. "Stay with me," he said. "We are almost there. Another mile." Juliana was not sure she could last another mile. The edges of her vision were starting to go dark and soft, and there was a terrible sleepy feeling stealing over her. She had heard stories of people freezing to death, how they fell asleep and never woke up. This must be how it started. "Miss Harper," Owen's voice was sharp now, cutting through the fog. "Juliana, stay awake, talk to me, tell me about this fellow you were running from." She forced her eyes open, forced words past her numb lips. "Thomas Garrett owns the biggest ranch in the territory. My uncle wanted the connection, the money." "And what did you want?" "Not him." The words came easier now, anger warming her from the inside. "His first wife fell down the stairs. His second wife drowned in the creek behind their house. I was not going to be the third Mrs. Garrett to die in some convenient accident." Owen swore, a long string of profanity that would have made Juliana blush under other circumstances. "Your uncle tried to marry you off to Thomas Garrett. That man is a snake in fancy clothing. You know him. I have done business in Ardmore. I know his reputation." Owen's voice was grim. "You were right to run, though next time maybe wait for better weather and steal a horse." "There was not going to be a next time," Juliana said. The wedding was set for this afternoon. It was now or never. "Then I am glad you chose now, even if you nearly froze to death doing it." He straightened in the saddle. "There, you see that light?" Juliana squinted through the snow and saw it, a faint golden glow in the distance, warm and welcoming as a star. "Is that your cabin?" "That is home," Owen confirmed. "I left the lamp burning when I rode out yesterday. Thought I would beat the storm back, but the business in Ardmore took longer than expected." The light grew steadily closer, and soon Juliana could make out the shape of a sturdy log cabin, smoke rising from the chimney. There was a barn beside it, and a corral with several horses standing with their backs to the wind. It was not a large spread, but it looked solid and well kept, a place built to last. Owen rode straight to the barn, ducking his head as they passed through the doors. The sudden absence of wind was shocking, like stepping into another world. Juliana could hear the soft sounds of animals shifting in their stalls, the whisper of hay, the creak of wood. "Let me get you inside first, then I will see to the horses," Owen said. He dismounted and reached up to lift Juliana down. Her legs buckled the moment her feet touched ground and he caught her, swinging her back up into his arms. "I have got you." He carried her out of the barn and through the snow to the cabin door, kicking it open with one booted foot. Well, one sock-covered foot, Juliana realized with a pang of guilt. He had given her his boots and was walking through snow in nothing but wool socks. The inside of the cabin was blessedly warm, heat radiating from a stone fireplace where coals still glowed red. Owen carried her straight to a rocking chair near the fire and set her down gently. "Do not move," he ordered. "I am going to build up this fire and then I need to check your feet." He moved quickly, adding logs to the fire and stirring the coals until flames leapt up, bright and hot. Then he was kneeling in front of her again, carefully pulling off his boots to examine her feet. His face went still as he looked at them. "How bad?" Juliana asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "Bad enough," Owen said quietly. "You have got frostbite on your toes and these cuts need cleaning. But I think we caught it in time. You are going to keep all your toes if we are lucky." He stood and moved to a shelf, pulling down a basin and several strips of clean cloth. He filled the basin with water from a kettle hanging near the fire, testing the temperature carefully. "This is going to hurt," he warned. "The water is lukewarm, not hot. We need to warm your feet slowly or we will do more damage." He was right. The moment he lowered her feet into the water, pain exploded through them, so intense Juliana cried out. It felt like 1,000 needles stabbing into her flesh all at once. Owen's hand found hers and she gripped it hard, tears streaming down her face. "I know," he said softly. "I know it hurts, but this is good. Pain means you still have feeling, means the nerves are not dead. Just breathe through it." Juliana focused on breathing, in and out, while the pain slowly, gradually began to fade to something more bearable. Owen kept her feet in the water for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes, occasionally adding more warm water from the kettle. Finally, he lifted them out and began to carefully dry them, then clean the cuts with what smelled like whiskey. "You are going to have some scars," he said, wrapping her feet in clean bandages. "But you will walk again just fine, I think." "Thank you," Juliana said, her voice rough. "You saved my life." Owen looked up at her, those blue eyes serious. "Any decent man would have done the same. But you were the one who did it. You gave me your boots. You carried me home." She felt fresh tears welling up, but these were different from the tears of pain. These were tears of gratitude, of relief, of overwhelming emotion at this stranger's kindness. "I do not know how to repay you. You do not owe me anything," Owen said firmly. He stood and moved to the stove. "Now, when did you last eat?" Juliana had to think about it. "Yesterday morning. Before my uncle told me the wedding was moved up." Owen shook his head, muttering something under his breath that sounded distinctly uncomplimentary about her uncle. He began pulling out supplies, moving around the small kitchen area with easy familiarity. Soon the smell of coffee filled the cabin, along with the sizzle of bacon in a pan. Juliana watched him work, taking in her surroundings more fully now. The cabin was simple but comfortable, everything neat and in its place. There was a bed in one corner with a colorful quilt, a table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with books and supplies. A rifle hung over the door and a pair of spurs sat on a hook. It was clearly the home of a man living alone, but it was clean and well-maintained, not the chaotic bachelor's quarters she might have expected. "You live here by yourself?" she asked. "Just me and the horses," Owen confirmed. He cracked eggs into the pan. I've got about 100 acres here, run a small herd of cattle. It is not much, but it is mine, bought and paid for." There was pride in his voice, and Juliana understood it. In the Wyoming Territory in 1885, owning your own land was no small accomplishment, especially for a young man who could not be more than 27 or 28. Owen brought her a plate piled with bacon, eggs, and thick slices of bread toasted over the fire. He handed her a mug of coffee, strong and black and hot enough to warm her from the inside out. Then he settled into the chair across from her with his own plate. Juliana ate ravenously, not realizing how hungry she had been until the food was in front of her. Owen ate more slowly, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "So," he said eventually, "what are you going to do now?" It was the question Juliana had been avoiding thinking about. "I do not know," she admitted. "I cannot go back to my uncle's ranch. He will just try to force me into the marriage again." "What about family elsewhere? Parents?" Juliana shook her head. "My parents died 5 years ago, yellow fever. My uncle took me in because he was my only living relative. I thought I was lucky." She laughed bitterly. "I should have known he was just waiting until I was old enough to be useful." Owen's jaw tightened. "A man who would sell his niece to Thomas Garrett is no kind of family at all." "No," Juliana agreed softly. "No, he is not." They finished eating in silence. Owen collected the plates and washed them in a bucket of water, then added more wood to the fire. Outside, full dark had fallen and the wind howled like a living thing. The storm showed no signs of letting up. "You can have the bed," Owen said, gesturing to the corner. "I will sleep in the chair." "I cannot take your bed," Juliana protested. "You have already given me your boots, your coat, your food." "You can and you will," Owen said in a tone that brooked no argument. "You have been through hell today. You need proper rest." He pulled a heavy blanket from a chest. "Besides, I have slept in worse places than a chair by a warm fire." Juliana wanted to argue more, but she was suddenly so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. The warmth of the fire, the food in her belly, the simple fact that she was safe, it all combined to make her feel like she could sleep for a week. Owen seemed to sense her exhaustion. "Go on," he said gently. "I will wake you if anything happens." Juliana stood carefully, testing her bandaged feet. They hurt, but they held her weight. She made her way to the bed and sank down onto it, still wearing Owen's heavy coat. The quilt smelled like wood smoke and leather and something else, something clean and masculine. She was asleep before her head fully settled on the pillow. She dreamed of snow and blood, of her uncle's angry face and Thomas Garrett's cold smile. But every time the dream turned dark, she felt warm arms around her, heard a quiet voice saying, "I have got you," and the nightmares faded. When Juliana woke, pale morning light was filtering through the cabin's single window. The storm had passed sometime in the night, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Everything outside was white and pristine and beautiful in a way that made her throat tight. Yesterday that snow had nearly killed her. Today it looked like a fresh start. Owen was still asleep in the chair, his head tilted back, one arm hanging over the side. In sleep he looked younger, the lines of worry smoothed from his face. Juliana found herself studying him properly for the first time. He was handsome in a rugged way, all strong jaw and weathered features, the kind of man clearly built for hard work and outdoor life. His hands, even in relaxation, looked strong and capable. These were hands that could rope a steer or gentle a horse or carry a freezing woman through a blizzard. As if sensing her gaze, Owen's eyes opened. He blinked a few times, orienting himself, then sat up straight. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "How are your feet?" "Sore," Juliana admitted, "but better than I expected." Owen stood and stretched, joints popping. Let me get the fire going again and make some coffee, then I need to check those bandages. He moved through the morning routine with the same quiet efficiency he had shown the night before. Soon the cabin was warm again and coffee was brewing. Owen knelt in front of Juliana and carefully unwrapped her feet, examining them with a critical eye. Swelling has gone down some, he said, and I do not see any signs of infection. That is good. He applied more of the whiskey to the cuts, making Juliana hiss, then rewrapped everything with fresh cloth. You need to stay off them as much as possible for the next few days. Let them heal. A few days, Juliana repeated. I cannot impose on you for that long. You are not imposing, Owen said firmly. You are recovering from damn near freezing to death. There is a difference. He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. Besides, even if you wanted to leave today, you could not. We got at least 2 feet of new snow last night. Roads will not be passable for days. Juliana joined him at the window, moving carefully on her sore feet. The world outside was breathtakingly beautiful but also undeniably treacherous. The snow lay in deep drifts, covering everything, erasing roads and paths. I suppose I am stuck here then, she said. I suppose you are, Owen agreed. He glanced at her, something like humor in his blue eyes. Could be worse places to be stuck. Over the next 3 days, Juliana learned the rhythms of Owen's life. He rose before dawn to tend to the animals, breaking ice on the water troughs and hauling hay to the horses and cattle. He checked the perimeter of his property, looking for damage from the storm or signs of predators. He chopped wood and mended tack, and did the 100 small tasks required to keep a ranch running, even a small one. And he took care of Juliana with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else. He changed her bandages twice a day, monitored her feet for signs of infection, made sure she ate regularly and stayed warm. He never made her feel like a burden, never showed impatience with her limitations. In the evenings they sat by the fire and talked. Juliana learned that Owen had come west from Ohio 5 years ago, drawn by the promise of land and opportunity. He had worked as a ranch hand for 3 years, saving every penny before buying this property. He had built the cabin himself, along with the barn and corrals. He ran a small herd of about 50 head of cattle, selling some each year in Ardmore for a modest profit. It is not much, he admitted one evening, whittling a piece of wood by firelight. But it is honest work and it is mine. No one can take it from me. That is more than most people can say, Juliana said. She was sitting in the rocking chair, her feet propped up on a small stool. You should be proud. What about you? Owen asked. Before your uncle decided to sell you off, what did you want from life? Juliana had to think about it. It had been so long since anyone had asked what she wanted. I wanted to teach, she said slowly. I love books, learning. I thought maybe I could be a school teacher somewhere, make my own way. You still could, Owen said. Could I? Juliana shook her head. I am a woman alone with no money, no references, nowhere to go. What school would hire me? One that needed a teacher more than they needed propriety, Owen said. There are new towns springing up all over the territory. A lot of them would be grateful for any teacher at all, woman or not. It was a nice thought, but Juliana was not sure she believed it. Still, she appreciated that Owen seemed to think she could do more than just find another man to marry, another person to depend on. On the 4th day, Juliana's feet had healed enough that she could walk around the cabin without pain. Owen declared her well enough to help with small tasks, and Juliana was grateful for something to do besides sit by the fire. She helped prepare meals, washed dishes, swept the floor. Small domestic tasks, but they made her feel useful, less like a burden. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Owen cleared his throat in a way that suggested he had something important to say. "The roads should be clear enough to travel by tomorrow," he said. "I was thinking I would ride into Ardmore, see what the situation is with your uncle and Thomas Garrett." Juliana's stomach clenched with anxiety. "What if they are looking for me?" "I imagine they are," Owen said bluntly. "Your uncle probably has half the territory searching, but I need to know what you are up against before we can figure out what to do next." "We," Juliana repeated softly. Owen met her eyes across the table. "You think I am just going to send you back out into the world with no plan and no protection? I am not that kind of man, Juliana." The way he said her name, soft and certain, made something warm unfold in Juliana's chest. Over the past 4 days, she had come to realize that Owen Owens was unlike any man she had ever met. He was kind without being condescending, strong without being brutal, generous without expecting anything in return. When he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she never had before. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Owen just nodded, looking almost embarrassed by her gratitude. They finished dinner and cleaned up together, moving around the small kitchen in a companionable rhythm that felt natural, like they had been doing this for years instead of days. That night, Juliana lay in Owen's bed and listened to him breathe in the chair by the fire. She thought about the life she had escaped, the cold, cruel man she had been meant to marry. She thought about the life she might build instead, somewhere new, teaching children their letters and sums. But mostly she thought about Owen, about his calloused hands and serious blue eyes, about the way he had given her his boots without hesitation, carried her through a blizzard to safety. She was falling in love with him. The realization should have terrified her, but instead it felt right, inevitable as spring following winter. How could she not love a man who had saved her life and asked nothing in return? How could she not love his quiet strength, his gentle competence, the way he treated her like a person with her own mind and will instead of property to be managed? But what did Owen feel? He was kind to her, certainly, but he was kind by nature. That did not mean he returned her growing feelings. And even if he did, what future could they have? Juliana had nothing to offer him but trouble and complications. She fell asleep still turning these thoughts over in her mind, no closer to answers. Owen rode out before dawn the next morning, leaving Juliana with strict instructions to stay inside and keep the rifle close, just in case. She spent the day trying not to worry, occupying herself with cleaning the already clean cabin and reading from Owen's small collection of books. He had an eclectic mix, some dime novels, a volume of Shakespeare, a book about animal husbandry, a worn Bible. Juliana chose the Shakespeare and lost herself in the familiar words. It was late afternoon when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She grabbed the rifle as Owen had instructed and went to the window, relaxing only when she recognized Owen's horse and rider. But her relief turned to concern when she saw his face as he dismounted. He looked grim. Owen came into the cabin and immediately went to warm his hands by the fire. Juliana waited, her heart pounding for him to speak. "Your uncle has the whole town in an uproar," Owen finally said. "He is telling everyone you were kidnapped, probably by outlaws. He has offered a reward for information leading to your return." "Kidnapped," Juliana repeated bitterly. Of course he would say that. Easier than admitting I ran away to escape the marriage he arranged. "Thomas Garrett is backing him up," Owen continued, playing the concerned almost husband. "It is making me sick to watch." He turned to face her. "But I also heard something interesting. Garrett's business is not doing as well as everyone thinks. Word is he owes money all over the territory. He needs that marriage to your uncle more than your uncle needs him." "Why does that matter?" "Because it means your uncle might be willing to negotiate," Owen said. If Garrett is desperate, your uncle holds more cards than he realizes. Juliana frowned. I am not going back to my uncle. I do not care what kind of negotiation you think might be possible. I know that, Owen said. I am not suggesting you go back. But what if we could make your uncle agree to leave you alone? Give up any claim on you. How would we do that? Owen hesitated, and Juliana saw something uncertain flicker across his face. You could marry someone else, he said quietly. If you were already married, legitimately and legally, there would be nothing your uncle could do. He could not force you to marry Garrett. Juliana's heart began to pound harder. Marry who? I do not know anyone in the territory besides you and my uncle and Thomas Garrett. Owen looked at her for a long moment, those blue eyes searching her face. You could marry me, he said. The words hung in the air between them, huge and impossible. Juliana stared at Owen, trying to read his expression, trying to understand what he was really offering. You do not want to marry me, she said finally. You barely know me, you are just trying to help. I know enough, Owen said. He took a step closer. I know you are brave enough to run through a blizzard rather than marry a man you do not love. I know you are kind and smart and you make me laugh. I know that having you here these past few days has been the best time I have had since I came to Wyoming. He paused. And I know that I want to wake up to your face every morning for the rest of my life. Juliana felt tears spring to her eyes. Owen. I am not saying it perfect or romantic, he continued, speaking faster now as if afraid he would lose his nerve. And I know the timing is all wrong. But Juliana, I care about you. I think maybe I am falling in love with you. And if you would consider letting me be your husband, I swear I would spend every day trying to make you happy. You are falling in love with me, Juliana whispered. I am, Owen said simply. I think I started falling the moment I saw you in the snow, so fierce and determined even when you were freezing to death. You are the strongest person I have ever met. Juliana closed the distance between them and took his hands in hers. I am falling in love with you too, she said. I did not want to admit it because it seemed too fast, too impossible. But you are the best man I have ever known, Owen Owens. You saved my life. You gave me your boots and carried me home. How could I not love you? Owen's face transformed, lit from within with joy. Is that a yes? Will you marry me? Yes, Juliana said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I will marry you. Owen pulled her into his arms and kissed her, gentle at first then deeper as she responded. It was Juliana's first real kiss. Nothing like the pawing advances she had received from Thomas Garrett during their brief courtship. This was everything a kiss should be. Warm and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. We should do this quickly, he said. The sooner we are married, the sooner you are safe from your uncle's schemes. Where would we even get married? Juliana asked. We cannot go back to Ardmore, not with my uncle there. There is a circuit preacher who comes through Laramie City once a month, Owen said. I heard in town he is due in 3 days. We could ride there, have the ceremony, file the paperwork. By the time your uncle finds out, it will be too late for him to stop it. 3 days. Juliana was going to be married in 3 days to a man she had known less than a week. It should have terrified her, but instead she felt nothing but certainty and happiness. This was right. Owen was right. They spent the next 3 days preparing for the journey to Laramie City and the life they would build together after. Owen rode to his nearest neighbor, a family named Hammond who lived 5 miles east, and asked them to look after his property while he was gone. Juliana worked on altering one of Owen's spare shirts into something more suitable for a woman to wear, since she could not very well travel in a torn wedding dress. She fashioned a split riding skirt from some canvas Owen had stored in the barn, clumsy work but functional. On the evening before they were set to leave, Owen took Juliana's hands in his and looked at her seriously. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Once we do this, there is no going back. You will be tied to me and this ranch and this life. It is not fancy. It is hard work and long winters, and sometimes we will struggle. I cannot offer you luxury or ease." Juliana squeezed his hands. "I do not want luxury or ease. I want a life that is mine to choose, a partner who sees me as an equal. I want you, Owen. Everything else we will figure out together." Owen smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his whole face. "Together," he agreed. "I like the sound of that." They set out before dawn, Owen on his best horse and Juliana on the gentle mare he kept for riding rather than working. The journey to Laramie City would take 2 days, camping one night on the trail. Owen had packed supplies carefully: food, bedrolls, a tent, and the rifle for protection. The weather had turned clear and cold but manageable, nothing like the blizzard that had brought them together. They rode through landscape that took Juliana's breath away. Vast plains dotted with sage, distant mountains sharp against the blue sky, eagles wheeling overhead. This was Wyoming in winter, harsh and beautiful and unforgiving. But with Owen beside her, Juliana felt no fear, only excitement for the future. They talked as they rode, sharing more of their histories. Owen told her about growing up on a small farm in Ohio, how he had always felt constricted there, longing for wider horizons. Juliana told him about her childhood before her parents died, how her mother had taught her to read and love learning, how her father had told her she could be anything she wanted to be. "They would have liked you," Juliana said. "My parents. They would have been glad I found someone like you." "I wish I could have met them," Owen said. "Anyone who raised a woman as remarkable as you must have been special people." That night they made camp in a sheltered valley, Owen setting up the tent while Juliana gathered firewood. They ate a simple dinner of beans and bacon, then sat by the fire and looked at the stars. The sky was so clear Juliana felt she could reach up and touch the distant lights. "Are you nervous?" Owen asked. "About tomorrow?" "No," Juliana said, and realized it was true. "I was more nervous about marrying Thomas Garrett, and I was not even sure I would go through with that. This feels different. This feels right." Owen reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I am going to do everything I can to make you happy," he said. "I know I am just a cowboy with a small ranch, but I promise you will always be valued and respected and loved." "You are not just a cowboy," Juliana said fiercely. "You are the man who saved my life. You are brave and kind and strong. You are everything I never knew I needed." They kissed again, slow and sweet under the enormous Wyoming sky. When they finally pulled apart, Owen cleared his throat. "You should sleep in the tent," he said. "I will keep watch out here." "Owen, we are getting married tomorrow. We can share the tent." "I know," Owen said. "But I want to do this right. I want our wedding night to be special, not rushed in a camp on the trail. Can you understand that?" Juliana felt a wave of love so strong it almost knocked her breathless. Of course Owen would think of that, would want to do everything properly and honorably. "I understand," she said softly, "and I love you even more for thinking of it." She went into the tent, but sleep was long in coming. She lay in her bedroll and listened to Owen moving around outside, tending the fire, checking the horses. Tomorrow she would become Juliana Owens. Tomorrow she would start a new life with a good man who loved her. The thought made her smile in the darkness. They reached Laramie City in the late afternoon of the second day, cold and tired but in good spirits. The town was larger than Ardmore, bustling with activity. Owen led them straight to a hotel, one of the nicer establishments on the main street. "We are getting married tomorrow," he told the proprietor, a stern-looking woman with gray hair. "We need 2 rooms for tonight." The woman's eyebrows rose. 2 rooms, night before your wedding." 2 rooms, Owen confirmed, his tone leaving no room for argument. The woman shrugged and handed over 2 keys. "Suite 2 and 3 upstairs. Dinner is at 6 in the dining room if you want it." Owen paid for the rooms and then turned to Juliana. "I need to go find the preacher, make sure he can perform the ceremony tomorrow. Why do not you rest and clean up? I will come get you for dinner." Juliana agreed, taking her key and heading upstairs. The room was small but clean, with a real bed and a basin for washing. There was even a mirror on the wall, and Juliana looked at her reflection with surprise. She had not seen herself in over a week. The woman looking back at her seemed different somehow, stronger and more certain than the frightened girl who had run through a blizzard. She washed as best she could and tried to make herself presentable. The altered shirt and canvas skirt were serviceable but hardly appropriate for dinner at a hotel. Still, they would have to do. She had nothing else. When Owen knocked on her door an hour later, he too had clearly made an effort to clean up. His hair was damp and combed back, his face freshly shaved. He wore clean clothes and his good hat, and he looked so handsome Juliana's breath caught. "The preacher can marry us tomorrow morning at 10, he said. "At the church on the corner. I also found a general store that stays open late. I thought maybe we could get you a proper dress for the wedding if you are willing." "Owen, you do not need to spend money on a dress I will only wear once." "It is your wedding day," Owen said firmly. "You should have a dress you choose, not something borrowed or made over. Please, Juliana, let me do this." They went to the general store after dinner, and the proprietor's wife helped Juliana find a simple dress in dark blue wool that fit reasonably well with only minor alterations. It was not fancy, but it was new and clean, and it made Juliana feel pretty. Owen also insisted on buying her a pair of proper boots and a warm cloak. "You saved my life with your boots," Juliana reminded him as the proprietor wrapped their purchases. "It seems only fair you get them back." "I got new ones already," Owen said, pointing to the sturdy leather boots he was wearing. "Besides, those old boots are special now. Maybe we should keep them as a reminder." "A reminder of the day I nearly froze to death. A reminder of the day we met," Owen corrected. "The day everything changed." That night, alone in her hotel room, Juliana tried to sleep but could not. Tomorrow she would be married. Tomorrow she would become Owen's wife in truth. The thought filled her with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had no mother to talk to about what to expect, no older sister to share advice. She knew the basics of what happened between husband and wife, but the details were vague and frightening. But this was Owen. Owen who had been nothing but gentle and respectful. Owen who had waited to kiss her until after she agreed to marry him. Owen who had insisted on separate rooms the night before their wedding because he wanted things to be proper. She trusted him completely. Morning came bright and cold. Juliana dressed in her new blue dress and boots, pinning her hair up as best she could without proper supplies. She looked at herself in the mirror and thought she looked like a proper bride, or at least close enough. Owen was waiting for her at the bottom of the stairs, and the look on his face when he saw her made all the nerves disappear. He looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "You look perfect," he said, offering his arm. "Ready to get married?" "Ready," Juliana confirmed. They walked together to the church, a simple white building with a tall steeple. The preacher was waiting inside, a kindly older man with a gentle smile. There were no guests, no family to witness the ceremony, just Juliana and Owen and God. The preacher began the familiar words and Juliana listened to them as if hearing them for the first time. "To have and to hold from this day forward, For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part. When it was time for vows, Owen took both of Juliana's hands in his and looked into her eyes. "I vow to protect you and provide for you," he said. "To respect your mind and value your opinions, to be your partner in all things, not your master. To love you every day of my life, from this moment until my last breath." Juliana's voice was steady as she made her own vows. "I vow to stand beside you in good times and bad, to work alongside you to build our life together, to trust you and support you and love you with everything I have. You gave me more than your boots and a ride home, Owen. You gave me freedom and choice and love. I will spend my life being worthy of those gifts." The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Owen kissed her it felt like the sealing of something sacred, a promise made and kept. They signed the marriage certificate, the preacher and his wife serving as witnesses. It was done. Juliana was legally married to Owen Owens. Her uncle could do nothing now. "What do you want to do now?" Owen asked as they left the church. "We could stay in Laramie City another night, have a proper wedding dinner." "I want to go home," Juliana said. "To the cabin. That is where we started. That is where I want to begin our marriage." Owen smiled. "Then home it is." They collected their things from the hotel and set out immediately, riding hard to try to make it back before dark. They did not quite manage it, dusk falling when they were still a few miles out, but neither of them minded. They made camp again, but this time there was no question of separate tents. Owen spread out both bedrolls inside the tent, making a wide bed. They lay down together fully clothed at first, just holding each other in the darkness. "Are you frightened?" Owen asked softly. "A little," Juliana admitted. "Not of you, just of the unknown." "We will go slow," Owen promised, "and if you want to stop at any point, we stop. This is about both of us, not just me. Do you understand?" Juliana understood that she had married a man who would always put her needs alongside his own, who saw her as an equal partner in every way. She kissed him in answer and let herself trust in his gentleness and patience. Their wedding night was tender and slow, Owen keeping his promise to be careful with her. There was some pain at first, but mostly there was closeness and intimacy, and the profound sense that they were becoming something new together, not just two individuals but a true partnership. Afterward they lay tangled together under the blankets, listening to the wind in the trees and the distant call of a coyote. "I love you," Owen said. "Mrs. Owens." "I love you too," Juliana said, smiling at the sound of her new name. "Mr. Owens." They reached the cabin the next day, and Juliana felt a surge of joy when it came into view. This was home now. This small ranch in the middle of the Wyoming territory was hers as much as Owen's. They settled quickly into married life, finding rhythms that worked for them. Juliana learned to help with the ranch work, tending the chickens Owen kept for eggs, helping repair fences, even learning to ride well enough to help move cattle. She was not strong enough for the heaviest work, but she could do plenty. And Owen never made her feel less valuable because she could not lift as much or ride as hard as he could. In turn, Owen helped with the household tasks, cooking and cleaning alongside Juliana. They were true partners in every way, working together to build their life. 3 weeks after their wedding, a rider came to the ranch. Owen answered the door with his rifle in hand, but the man held up his hands peacefully. "I am not here for trouble," the man said. "I have got a message from Thomas Garrett." Owen's jaw tightened, but he did not lower the rifle. "What does Garrett want?" "He wants to know if Mrs. Harper is here," the man said. Then he noticed Juliana standing behind Owen and his eyes widened. "Miss Harper, your uncle has been looking everywhere for you. It is Mrs. Owens now. Juliana said, stepping forward to stand beside her husband. "I am married, legally and legitimately married." The man's eyes went from Juliana to Owen and back again. "Garrett is not going to like this." "I do not care what Garrett likes," Owen said flatly. "My wife is under my protection now. If he or her uncle have a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly, but they will not get near Juliana. Do you understand?" The man nodded slowly. "I will deliver the message." He started to turn his horse, then paused. "For what it is worth, miss or madam, I guess, folks in town are starting to ask questions about the whole situation. Garrett's story is not holding up like he thought it would." After the man left, Owen and Juliana looked at each other. "Do you think they will come here?" Juliana asked. "Maybe," Owen said, "but we are ready for them if they do." But no one came. A week later, they heard news through Owen's neighbor Hammond that Thomas Garrett had left the territory suddenly, fleeing debts and angry creditors. Juliana's uncle had been forced to sell most of his ranch to cover his own obligations, left with a small holding and no influence. "It is over," Owen said when he brought the news home to Juliana. "You are safe. No one is coming for you." Juliana felt years of tension drain out of her. She was safe. She was free. She was home. The winter passed, cold and hard but bearable inside the warm cabin with Owen beside her. They talked about their dreams for the future, expanding the ranch, maybe buying a few more head of cattle, someday building a bigger house. "I want children," Owen said one night as they lay in bed. "If you do, I want sons and daughters to help work this ranch and carry on after we are gone." "I want that too," Juliana said. She put his hand on her stomach. "And I think we might be on our way to that already." Owen's eyes went wide. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I think I am with child," Juliana confirmed. "It is early still, but all the signs are there." Owen pulled her into his arms, his face radiant with joy. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby." Their son was born in the autumn of 1886, strong and healthy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Samuel, after Owen's father. Juliana had never imagined she could love anything as much as she loved Owen, but holding their son in her arms, she discovered new depths to her heart. Owen was a devoted father, caring for Samuel with the same gentle competence he brought to everything else. He would walk the floor with the baby at night when Samuel was fussy, singing old songs in his rough voice. He built a cradle by hand, every joint perfect, every edge smooth. When Samuel was 6 months old, Juliana brought up the idea that had been forming in her mind for weeks. "The Hammond children have been asking me to teach them their letters," she said. "Mrs. Hammond mentioned that there are several families in the area who would love for their children to have some schooling." Owen looked up from the harness he was mending. "Are you thinking of starting a school?" "Maybe," Juliana said. "Nothing formal, just a few hours, a few days a week. I could teach here at the ranch, or we could use the barn in good weather. What do you think?" "I think you would be a wonderful teacher," Owen said immediately. "And I think those children would be lucky to have you." "Do it." So Juliana began teaching, starting with just 5 students and growing to 15 by the end of the first year. She taught reading and writing and arithmetic, history and geography when she could get the books. The children's families paid when they could, in eggs or milk or labor on the ranch. It was not much, but it was something, and Juliana loved every minute of it. She taught in the mornings and helped with the ranch in the afternoons, Samuel playing nearby in a pen Owen had built. Life was full and busy and sometimes exhausting, but it was good. 2 years after Samuel's birth, Juliana had a daughter. They named her Rose, and she was as different from her brother as could be, all fire and stubbornness, where Samuel was gentle and thoughtful. Owen adored her, carrying her everywhere on his shoulders, unable to deny her anything. "You are spoiling her," Juliana told him, watching Rose wrap her father around her tiny finger. "She has got me completely fooled," Owen admitted, utterly unrepentant. "And I do not even care." The years rolled by, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. Samuel grew tall and serious, learning to ride almost before he could walk. Rose was smaller but fearless, always trying to keep up with her older brother. They fought and played and grew together under the big Wyoming sky. Juliana's school expanded, moving to a proper schoolhouse that the local families built together on land Owen donated. She taught children from all over the area, watching them learn and grow, sending them out into the world with the tools they needed to make their own way. Owen's ranch prospered, growing slowly but steadily. They added more cattle, bought some good breeding stock. They built a larger house, with separate rooms for the children and a real kitchen for Juliana. But they kept the original cabin, using it for storage and occasionally for guests. Neither of them could bear to tear it down, that place where their life together had truly begun. On their 10th anniversary, Owen took Juliana back to the spot where he had found her in the snow. It was summer now, wildflowers blooming where snowdrifts had been. "I think about this place sometimes," Owen said, his arm around Juliana's waist. "I think about what would have happened if I had not ridden home that day, if I had stopped somewhere else to wait out the storm." "But you did not," Juliana said. "You rode home, you found me, you saved me." "We saved each other, I think," Owen said. He pulled her close. "You gave me something to build toward, something more than just a ranch. You gave me family and purpose and love. You made my house into a home." "You gave me freedom," Juliana countered. "You gave me choice and respect and partnership. You gave me your boots and carried me home, and I will love you for that until the day I die." They stood together in the meadow, surrounded by beauty, and thought about the unlikely series of events that had brought them together. A blizzard and a desperate flight. Frostbitten feet and a stranger's kindness. A pair of boots and a long ride home. Such small things, really, but they had changed everything. More years passed, bringing more children, 3 more in total. Twins named Michael and Matthew, and finally another daughter called Elizabeth. The ranch house echoed with noise and laughter, with children's quarrels and bedtime stories, with the sounds of a life fully lived. Samuel grew into a young man and took over more of the ranch work, clearly meant to follow in his father's footsteps. Rose surprised everyone by proving to be a natural teacher, helping Juliana with the younger students. The twins were inseparable, always together, always scheming some new adventure. Little Elizabeth was the baby, spoiled by everyone, sweet-tempered and affectionate. Juliana and Owen's hair began to gray, lines deepening on their faces, but the love between them never faded. If anything, it grew stronger with time, tempered by shared struggles and joys. They had built something real together, something lasting. On their 20th anniversary, their children threw them a party, inviting half the territory. The ranch was full of people, food, music, and celebration. Someone brought out a fiddle and there was dancing in the yard, children running wild, adults laughing and sharing stories. Owen pulled Juliana into a dance, both of them laughing as they spun across the grass. They were not as graceful as they had once been, but they fit together perfectly, knowing each other's movements without thought. "Happy?" Owen asked. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Juliana said. "You?" "Same," Owen said. He pulled her closer. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy with a small ranch and big dreams." "Thank you for giving me your boots," Juliana said. "Thank you for carrying me home." They danced until the stars came out. surrounded by their children and friends, blessed by the life they had built together from nothing but courage and kindness and love. Samuel married a few years later, bringing his wife to live on the ranch and help with the work. They gave Owen and Juliana their first grandchild, a boy with serious eyes and his grandfather's patient way with horses. Then came more grandchildren as the other children grew and married and started families of their own. The ranch house had to be expanded again to accommodate everyone who came for visits, and there was talk of some of the children building their own places on the property, creating a small family compound. Owen liked the idea of having everyone close, liked the thought of multiple generations working the land together. "This is what it is all about," he told Juliana one evening as they sat on the porch and watched their grandchildren play in the yard. "Family, legacy, building something that lasts beyond our own lives. We have been very lucky," Juliana said. "Lucky?" Owen looked at her, eyebrows raised. "Woman, you nearly froze to death running away from a forced marriage. I would not call that lucky." "But I found you," Juliana said simply. "Out of all the possible paths my feet could have taken that day, they took me to you. If that is not luck, I do not know what is." Owen could not argue with that. He took her hand, the one that now wore a simple gold band he had bought her 5 years into their marriage, and raised it to his lips. "Luck, fate, divine intervention, whatever it was, I am grateful," he said. "Every single day I am grateful." As they grew older, Owen and Juliana gradually handed over more of the ranch work to Samuel and the other children. They still helped where they could, but they were content to take a less active role, to enjoy watching the next generation take over. Juliana continued teaching as long as she was able, finally retiring when her eyes grew too weak for reading. By then, Rose had taken over the school completely, teaching with the same passion and dedication her mother had shown. It pleased Juliana deeply to see her daughter carrying on that work. On their 30th anniversary, Owen presented Juliana with a gift, a pair of boots. Not just any boots, but the ones he had given her in the snow all those years ago, preserved and mounted on a wooden stand. "I found them in the back of the old cabin," he said. "Thought you might like to have them." Juliana looked at the boots, worn and scarred, still too large for her feet. They were not beautiful, but they were precious beyond measure. They represented everything good in her life, the moment when death turned to life, fear turned to hope, loneliness turned to love. "Put them somewhere we can see them every day," she said. "I want to remember that moment, that day, forever." The boots went on the mantel in the main room, and they stayed there for the rest of Juliana and Owen's lives. Visitors would ask about them, about why a pair of old boots held such a place of honor, and one of the children or grandchildren would tell the story. About the blizzard and the desperate flight. About the cowboy who gave a freezing woman his boots and carried her to safety. About the love that grew from that single act of kindness. Owen lived to be 78, dying peacefully in his sleep with Juliana beside him. He had been slowing down in his last years, but he was still himself until the end, kind, steady, devoted to his family. His last words were to Juliana. "Loved you from the moment I saw you in that snow," he whispered. "Best decision I ever made, stopping to help you. Best thing that ever happened to me, you finding me," Juliana whispered back. "I love you. I have loved you for 45 years, and I will love you beyond this life." He squeezed her hand, smiled one last time, and was gone. Juliana grieved deeply, but she did not break. She had their children and grandchildren around her, had the life they had built together to sustain her. She lived another 8 years, spending them surrounded by family, teaching those great-grandchildren who would listen, telling stories about their grandfather and the early days of the ranch. On what would have been her and Owen's 53rd anniversary, Juliana lay down for an afternoon rest and simply did not wake up. She was 86 years old, and she went peacefully, a small smile on her face. Her children liked to think she had gone to find Owen, that they were together again, somewhere beyond this life. The family buried her next to Owen on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains and endless sky. Her gravestone was simple: Juliana Harper Owens, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, teacher. But Samuel, who inherited the ranch and ran it for many more years, did one more thing. He took the boots from the mantle and brought them to the grave, placing them at the base of the headstone. "These belong here," he told his own children and grandchildren. "This is where it all started, with these boots and a snowstorm and a father who could not pass by someone who needed help. We all exist because of this moment, because Grandpa gave Grandma his boots and carried her home. We should never forget that." The boots weathered and crumbled over the years, but the story did not. It passed down through generations of the Owens family, told and retold until it became almost legend. The story of how their family began, how love grew from kindness, how a single choice on a snowy day changed everything. The ranch stayed in the family for over 100 years, growing and changing but maintaining its heart. And every generation made sure to tell their children about Owen and Juliana, about the boots and the blizzard and the love that lasted a lifetime. It was a story about courage and kindness, about taking chances on strangers, about building something lasting from the smallest beginning. It was a love story, pure and simple, the kind that happened once in a lifetime if you were very lucky. The kind that started with a woman walking barefoot in the snow and a cowboy who gave her his boots and carried her home.